The bombs fell like rain across the golden fields of Nalari Prime. Council leader Ramiz watched from her tower window as centuries of peace turned to ash in mere hours. Her people had never built weapons. They never imagined they would need them. The galaxy had always been civilized, ordered, safe. That belief died today. The Krellian warships hung in orbit like dark clouds, their weapons tearing through cities that had stood for 1,000 years. Ramiz had sent 17 desperate messages to the Galactic Council, 17 pleas for help. The responses came back in carefully worded diplomatic language that meant absolutely nothing. The Council needed time to debate. They needed to form committees. They needed to consider precedent and protocol. Her people needed help now. Council leader, a voice broke through her despair. Ambassador Terrence Howard stood in the doorway, his human face grim. My shuttle is ready. I can evacuate you and your family. What about everyone else? Ramiz gestured toward the window where smoke rose from burning cities. What about the millions who have nowhere to run? Howard moved beside her, watching the destruction. I've sent a message to Earth, a direct emergency transmission. Will they come? Ramiz had met humans before, strange creatures who seemed to carry sadness in their eyes even when they smiled. They were newcomers to the galaxy, barely a century since first contact. Most species still considered them primitive. I don't know. Howard's honesty cut deeper than false hope would have. But if they do come, they won't come alone. That's not how humans work. Another explosion rocked the city below. Ramiz could hear screaming even from this height. The Krellian commander had given them 48 hours to surrender completely. After that, he promised total extermination. The word felt unreal in her mind. Her people had studied art, music, philosophy for millennia. Now they would simply cease to exist. The council suggested we negotiate. Ramiz laughed bitterly. They said we should offer the Krellians resource rights, cultural exchanges, as if invaders who murder children want to discuss trade agreements. Howard pulled out a small device, checking its display. The other species don't understand. They've been peaceful so long they forgot what evil looks like. They think everyone can be reasoned with, given enough time and the right words. And humans, you understand evil. We lived with it for thousands of years. Howard's voice carried weight that made Ramiz look at him differently. We know what it looks like. We know it doesn't stop because you're polite or because you follow proper procedures. It stops when someone makes it stop. A Nalari guard rushed into the chamber, his ceremonial robes torn and bloodied. Council leader, the Krellians are landing ground forces in the eastern provinces. Our security personnel have no weapons to fight them. They're slaughtering everyone they find. Ramiz felt her legs weaken. Howard caught her arm, steadying her. How long until your people arrive? She asked. If they're coming and if they push their engines hard, maybe 30 hours. We have 48 hours before the Krellians begin their final assault. Then we have 18 hours to spare. Howard tried to smile, but it looked wrong on his face. Humans are good at cutting things close. Down in the streets, Nalari families fled toward designated shelters. They carried children and elderly parents, clutching photo crystals and memory stones. Everything else they owned burned behind them. These were people who wrote poetry about flowers and spent lifetimes perfecting single musical compositions. Now they ran for their lives from an enemy they never provoked. Why would your people come? Ramiz asked quietly. We have nothing to offer Earth, no strategic value, no resources you need. We're strangers who barely know each other. Howard turned from the window. Because you asked, because you need help, that's enough. That's not logical. No, Howard checked his device again, but it's human. The Krellian bombardment intensified as darkness fell across Nalari Prime. Their commander broadcast messages demanding immediate surrender. He described in detail what would happen to those who resisted. The Galactic Council sent another message requesting all parties remain calm and consider diplomatic solutions. Ramiz stood in her tower and made a choice. She would not surrender. She would not condemn her people to slavery or death simply because the galaxy was too civilized to fight back against barbarism. If humans understood evil, if they knew how to stop it, then she would trust this strange ambassador who promised help might come. Tell me about Earth. She needed something to hold on to. Tell me about your people. Howard looked up at the stars beyond the smoke and fire. We're not always good. We've done terrible things to each other throughout our history, but we learned something from all that darkness. We learned that standing by while innocents suffer is its own kind of evil. We learned that sometimes the only answer to violence is greater violence in defense of those who can't defend themselves. Will that be enough? Against the Krellians? Yes. Howard's certainty was absolute. If humanity answers your call, they won't come to negotiate. They won't come to observe or establish diplomatic channels. They'll come to end this. Ramiz looked out at her dying world and allowed herself the smallest measure of hope. Somewhere beyond the stars, perhaps humanity had heard her plea. Perhaps they were coming. She just hoped they would arrive in time. The emergency transmission reached Earth during what should have been a routine security briefing. Admiral Patricia Wong was reviewing supply chain logistics when her aide burst through the door without knocking. That alone told her something catastrophic had happened. Ambassador Howard sent a priority alpha message from Nalari Prime. The aide's hand shook slightly as she handed over the data pad. The Krellians are conducting a full-scale invasion. Civilian casualties already in the thousands. The Galactic Council is refusing to intervene. Wong read the message twice. The words were simple enough. Civilians under attack. Request immediate assistance. But the implications made her throat tight. Nalari Prime was 6 days away at standard fleet speeds. Howard reported the Krellians had given a 48-hour ultimatum. Get me General Akafor. Wong was already moving toward the command center. And wake up every captain in the 3rd Fleet. I don't care what time zone they're in. Within 20 minutes, Wong stood in the primary operations room watching holographic displays light up with ship positions and status reports. General Akafor appeared on the main screen from Earth Command Headquarters, his face carved from stone. The Galactic Council sent us an official notice. Akafor's voice dripped with contempt. They're requesting we observe proper diplomatic channels and avoid escalating the situation. They're asking us to let civilians die while they debate. Wong felt rage building in her chest. How many ships can we scramble? If we pull everything from the outer colonies and the Mars defense grid, maybe 60 ships within response range. Akafor paused. But Wong, that leaves our own territory vulnerable. The Council isn't going to back us on this. We'll be on our own. Those are families being murdered while bureaucrats discuss procedure. Wong pulled up fleet manifests. We're going. I agree. Akafor smiled grimly. I already sent authorization codes to all colonial defense forces and corporate security fleets in surrounding sectors. Anyone who wants to volunteer for a humanitarian mission. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, Captain Rebecca Frost reported that her carrier group was already breaking orbit. Colonial governors authorized their entire defense fleets to join the operation. Mining corporations retrofitted their survey ships with military hardware. Private security companies volunteered their vessels without even asking about payment. The Galactic Council sent increasingly urgent messages demanding humanity reconsider this reckless action. Other species watched in confusion as humans abandoned strategic positions to rush toward a species they barely knew. A Tekarian diplomat sent a formal inquiry, asking what strategic advantage Nalari Prime offered that justified such risk. Admiral Wong recorded her response personally. They asked for help. That's the only strategic consideration we need. The alien's reply came back within minutes. This is irrational. You're exposing your homeworld defenses for strangers with no tactical value. Wang deleted the message without responding further. Humans didn't need other species to understand their choices. Lieutenant Felix Grant worked triple shifts plotting the fastest possible route to Nalari Prime. Standard fleet doctrine required safe engine margins and regular cooldown periods. Grant threw doctrine out the airlock and calculated routes that would burn out half their power systems. When Wang reviewed his numbers, she approved them immediately. If we push this hard, some ships won't make it back without major repairs. Grant felt obligated to point out the risks. If we don't push this hard, everyone on Nalari Prime won't make it back at all. Wang's tone ended the discussion. Across human space, the mobilization continued. Admiral Chen pulled her entire battle group from the frontier zones. Commander Williams stripped the asteroid mining colonies of every armed vessel. Even civilian cargo haulers started mounting whatever weapons they could acquire through legal or questionable channels. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Ambassador Foster attended via hologram and endured 3 hours of various species explaining why humanity's response was inappropriate, dangerous, and violated established protocols for handling regional conflicts. You're proposing to intervene in a sovereign invasion. The Quilloran representative's tentacles waved in agitation. The Krellians have legitimate grievances about territorial disputes with the Nalari. Show me these legitimate grievances. Foster's voice was ice. Show me which territorial dispute justifies bombing civilian population centers and targeting children. The chamber fell silent. The Quilloran changed the subject. Back on the flagship, Admiral Wang watched the fleet assembly with pride that bordered on pain. 215 ships had answered the call. Proper warships, yes, but also mining vessels, cargo haulers, corporate security craft, and even a handful of private yachts whose owners had bolted weapons onto their hulls. It was chaos by military standards. It was also the most human thing Wang had ever witnessed. We're going to arrive with the strangest fleet composition in history, Captain Frost observed from her carrier. Half these vessels aren't even military grade. Doesn't matter. Wang studied the tactical displays. What matters is we're going. 28 hours after Howard's initial transmission, the assembled human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel. They pushed their engines 40% beyond recommended safety limits. Some ships would suffer permanent damage. Others might not survive the journey. Every captain volunteered anyway. The Krellians wouldn't know what hit them. They expected maybe a few human ships to show up and file diplomatic protests. They expected the galaxy to follow its usual pattern of debate, discussion, and carefully worded condemnations. They forgot that humans came from a world that taught them a simple truth. Sometimes the only moral choice is to fight. Sometimes protecting the innocent requires violence against those who would harm them. Sometimes you don't wait for perfect solutions or unanimous agreement. Sometimes you just go. 24 hours into the siege, Nalari Prime was dying by degrees. Dr. Amira Hassan worked in what used to be a children's art gallery, now converted into a makeshift hospital. The colorful paintings on the walls showed happy Nalari families under peaceful skis. Those skis now rained fire. "Doctor, we need you in the East Wing." A young Nalari medical student rushed toward her, his hands stained with blood that wasn't his own. Multiple casualties from the latest bombardment. Hassan grabbed her medical kit and followed. The embassy staff numbered only 32 humans total, including 6 security personnel. They were trying to coordinate civilian evacuations across an entire planet. It was impossible work. They did it anyway. Ambassador Howard found her 3 hours later, exhausted and covered in dust from a collapsed building. The Krellians moved up their timeline. They're beginning ground operations now instead of waiting for the deadline. "How long until your fleet arrives?" Hassan didn't look up from the Nalari child she was treating. The girl had been pulled from rubble that used to be her school. 26 hours if they push hard, but the Krellians are landing troops in the eastern provinces now. They're not waiting. Hassan finished bandaging the child and passed her to a Nalari nurse. Then we buy time. How? With 6 soldiers and whatever weapons we can scrounge. Howard's smile was bitter. The Krellians have an army. We have good intentions and improvised tactics. The human embassy security team consisted of 6 former soldiers who were supposed to guard diplomats at formal events. Now, they prepared to fight a guerrilla war against an invasion force. Sergeant Davis gathered civilian volunteers and taught them how to set ambushes. Corporal Kim showed Nalari University students how to make improvised explosives from common chemicals. Council leader Ramiz watched these preparations with growing horror and gratitude. Your people will die trying to slow an army with a handful of soldiers. Maybe, Davis checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, but we'll make the Krellians pay for every meter they advance. That buys your people time to evacuate. In orbit, Krellian commander Yavin watched the human efforts with amusement. His fleet of 80 warships controlled the space around Nalari Prime completely. The planet's orbital defenses had been pathetic, barely worth destroying. Now he prepared to land the occupation forces that would end this. A communication officer approached his command station. Commander, we intercepted a faster-than-light transmission from Earth. They're sending a response fleet. How many ships? Our intelligence estimates between 20 and 40 vessels, standard human military composition. Yavin laughed. They'll arrive to find a conquered planet. By the time humans get here, there won't be anything left to save. He opened a channel to the planet below. This is Commander Yavin to all Nalari population centers. Your human allies are too slow and too weak. Surrender now and you'll be allowed to live as servants. Resist and you'll be eliminated. You have 6 hours to decide. Below, in the ruins of what used to be a beautiful capital city, Ambassador Howard gathered with Ramiz and the other Nalari leaders. The 6 hours deadline would expire long before human ships arrived. Even if they evacuated continuously, they could only save a fraction of the population. We should surrender. One of the Nalari council members spoke quietly. Slavery is better than extinction. Is it? Howard pulled up holographic records. These are Krellian occupation zones from 3 other worlds. This is what they do to conquered populations. The images showed horrors that made even the diplomat council members turn away. Ramiz straightened her spine. Then we fight. Even if we lose, we fight. The human soldiers deployed across the planet in teams of 1, coordinating with Nalari volunteers who had never held weapons before. They hit supply convoys. They sabotaged landing zones. They made every Krellian advance cost blood and time. Davis and his team destroyed a Krellian ammunition depot using nothing but mining explosives and desperation. Kim taught Nalari farmers how to set traps that disabled armored vehicles. They couldn't win. They knew it. They fought anyway. Dr. Hassan's field hospital moved 3 times in 12 hours, staying ahead of Krellian ground forces by minutes. She operated on soldiers and civilians alike, human and Nalari together, while bombs fell close enough to shake surgical instruments from tables. A Nalari nurse worked beside her, learning human medical techniques on the fly. Why do you stay? You could evacuate. The ambassador offered you a place on the shuttle. These people need help. Hassan sutured another wound. I'm a doctor, that's reason enough. In orbit, Commander Yavin grew increasingly irritated. His ground forces reported unexpected resistance. Nothing major, just annoying delays and casualties from ambushes that shouldn't have been possible. A handful of humans and untrained civilians were costing him time and soldiers. Status of the orbital bombardment weapons. He decided to end this quickly. Charged and ready, Commander. We can begin sterilization of major population centers on your order." Yavin smiled. 6 hours had passed since his ultimatum. The Nalari had made their choice. Target their largest cities, prepare to fire on my mark. On the ground, Ambassador Howard received warning from their orbital sensors. The Krellian ships were powering up weapons designed to burn atmosphere and boil oceans. This was the end. The human fleet was still hours away. There would be nothing left to save. He stood with Remise on the remains of her tower, watching the sky. "I'm sorry we tried." "You did more than try." Remise took his hand. "You gave us hope when the entire galaxy turned away. That matters." The Krellian weapons reached full charge. Commander Yavin gave the order to fire. Then his sensors officer screamed. The sensor display on Commander Yavin's flagship showed impossible numbers. Faster-than-light signatures erupted across every display like stars being born. 1, 10, 50, 100. The numbers kept climbing. "Report." Yavin gripped his command station as his bridge crew descended into chaos. 215 vessels, Commander, multiple class types. They're human." The sensors officer couldn't hide the fear in his voice. They weren't supposed to arrive for another 4 hours. Yavin felt ice spread through his veins. Human intelligence suggested they might send 20 ships, maybe 40 at most. This was an entire war fleet. They had burned their engines beyond safety limits to arrive early. They had sacrificed ship integrity and crew safety just to get here faster. The human transmission came through on all frequencies. Admiral Patricia Wang's voice was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. "This is the human Third Fleet to all Krellian vessels. You are attacking civilian targets. Power down your weapons immediately and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Yavin barked a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "They're bluffing. No species commits their entire military to protect strangers." He opened a channel. "This is Commander Yavin of the Krellian Expansion Fleet. Nalari Prime is under our authority. Withdraw or be destroyed." The human response came from Captain Rebecca Frost aboard the carrier Valiant. "You have 30 seconds to comply. After that, we will consider you hostile combatants engaged in war crimes against civilian populations. Fire on the human ships." Yavin gave the order with confidence he didn't feel. "Show them the cost of interfering in Krellian operations." The Krellian fleet opened fire first. That single decision sealed their fate. Human vessels scattered like a school of fish, their formation dissolving into what looked like chaos, but was actually precisely coordinated tactical doctrine. Krellian weapons fire passed through empty space where human ships had been milliseconds before. Then the humans returned fire. It wasn't like any battle the Krellians had studied. Most species engaged in long-range exchanges, wearing each other down over hours. Humans closed distance aggressively, mixing vessel types in ways that violated standard tactical doctrine, and attacked with a ferocity that suggested personal grudges rather than military objectives. A mining ship accelerated to ramming speed and crashed through a Krellian destroyer's shields, breaching the hull before detonating its entire fuel supply. Corporate security vessels deployed weapons that weren't technically legal under galactic conventions. Colonial defense craft flew patterns that should have resulted in collisions, but instead created overlapping fields of fire that Krellian ships couldn't escape. Lieutenant Felix Grant coordinated the assault from his navigation station aboard the flagship. Krellian formation is fracturing. They're trying to establish a defensive perimeter. "Don't let them." Admiral Wang's orders were absolute. "Break their formation, get between their ships, make them afraid to fire without hitting their own forces." Human fighters launched from carriers and swarmed through the Krellian fleet like angry hornets. They were smaller, faster, and apparently piloted by people with no sense of self-preservation. A Krellian cruiser tried to target one fighter, and found itself facing 12 others that had used their companion as bait. On the ground, Ambassador Howard watched the sky light up with weapons fire and exploding ships. The Krellian bombardment had stopped the instant the human fleet arrived. "They're here. They actually came." Ramiz couldn't speak. She just watched as the stars themselves seemed to go to war above her world. Commander Yavin realized his mistake too late. The humans hadn't come to fight a battle. They had come to eliminate a threat. Every tactic they used was designed not to defeat his fleet but to destroy it completely. They gave no quarter. They showed no hesitation. They fought like demons protecting something precious. "Retreat!" Yavin finally gave the order he should have given 30 minutes earlier. "All ships retreat to the outer system." But the humans had anticipated retreat. They had positioned vessels during the initial engagement to cut off escape routes. Krellian ships found their flight paths blocked by human vessels that should have been engaged elsewhere. It was a trap that had been sprung the moment the battle began. Captain Frost's carrier moved through the chaos like a predator. Her fighter wings pursued fleeing Krellian ships with single-minded determination. When a Krellian frigate tried to surrender, she accepted it. When another tried to flee while still firing, her guns reduced it to debris. A communication came through from the Galactic Council, some ambassador demanding an immediate ceasefire and diplomatic negotiations. Admiral Wang muted the channel without responding. There would be time for diplomacy after the threat was eliminated. A Krellian heavy cruiser made a desperate run for the outer system. 3 human destroyers broke from formation and pursued. The engagement lasted 40 seconds. The cruiser became an expanding cloud of shrapnel. Yavin's flagship took hits from multiple directions simultaneously. Shields failed. Hull breaches vented atmosphere. His bridge crew died around him as human weapons tore through the ship's superstructure. He reached for the emergency beacon, intending to surrender, and found his console dead. The last thing Commander Yavin saw was a human fighter craft positioning itself perfectly in front of his viewscreen. The pilot inside couldn't possibly see him through all the battle damage, but Yavin swore the human was looking right at him. Then the fighter fired. 27 minutes after arriving, the human fleet held complete orbital superiority over Nalari Prime. 40 Krellian vessels destroyed. 28 captured or disabled. 12 fled into faster-than-light travel with human pursuit ships following. Not a single human ship was lost, though many bore scars from the engagement. Admiral Wang opened channels to the planet below. "Nalari Prime, this is the 3rd Fleet. Your space is secure. We're landing relief forces now." Human soldiers landed across Nalari Prime while fires still burned in the cities. Captain Rebecca Frost walked through the ruins of the capital alongside Ambassador Howard, seeing for the first time what her fleet had been fighting to protect. Nalari families emerged from shelters, blinking in the daylight, hardly believing the bombardment had stopped. Children clutched their parents and stared at the human soldiers with wide eyes. These were the people the Krellians would have exterminated: artists, musicians, teachers, families. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." Council leader Ramiz approached Frost with tears streaming down her face. "You saved us. You actually saved us." Frost felt uncomfortable with gratitude. "We did what needed doing. Anyone decent would have done the same." "But they didn't." Ramiz gestured toward the sky. "The entire Galactic Council debated while we died. Only humans came. Human medical ships established field hospitals in every major city. Dr. Hassan finally had proper equipment and supplies instead of improvised tools and hope. She worked alongside Nalari doctors, sharing techniques and learning from each other. The wounded came in hundreds, then thousands. They treated everyone. Sergeant Davis and his security team, exhausted from days of guerrilla warfare, helped coordinate civilian return to damaged areas. The Nalari volunteers who had fought beside them were given recognition and thanks. They had held the line when it mattered most. In orbit, Admiral Wang received constant communications from the Galactic Council, demands for immediate withdrawal, accusations of excessive force, threats of sanctions and diplomatic isolation. She ignored them all and focused on the tactical displays. 12 Krellian ships had escaped the initial engagement. Her pursuit forces tracked them toward Krellian territory. Lieutenant Grant monitored their progress with predatory focus. The Krellians are broadcasting distress calls. Grant pulled up the intercepts. They're claiming humans attacked them without provocation. Send those broadcasts to every species in the sector. Wang's smile was cold. Along with our combat footage showing them firing first, and the recordings of them targeting civilian population centers. The Krellian lies died quickly when confronted with evidence. The fleeing ships found no sanctuary in neighboring systems. Other species, seeing what humans had done to the Krellian fleet, suddenly remembered pressing commitments elsewhere when asked for assistance. One Krellian destroyer tried to hide in an asteroid field. Human fighters found it within hours. The captain surrendered before a shot was fired. On Nalari Prime, human engineers worked with Nalari construction teams to restore power grids and water systems. Corporate vessels that had volunteered for the mission now delivered food, medicine, and building materials. They asked for no payment. They filed no compensation requests. They just helped. A Nalari child approached a human soldier and offered him a drawing she had made. It showed a human ship arriving like a star in the darkness. The soldier, a decorated combat veteran who had faced death without flinching, had to turn away to hide tears. The Galactic Council convened another emergency session. This time, Ambassador Howard attended in person, with Council Leader Ramiz beside him. The chamber held representatives from 43 species, and most of them looked either embarrassed or angry. The Quilleran representative spoke first. The human military response was excessive and violated 17 articles of galactic military conduct. The Krellian fleet was destroyed far beyond what was necessary to secure civilian safety. Howard stood slowly. The Krellian fleet was conducting genocide. They were hours away from sterilizing population centers. There is no excessive force when stopping genocide. Proper channels exist for addressing such conflicts. A Valdrine diplomat waved multiple arms dismissively. The council would have intervened eventually. Eventually, Ramiz spoke the word like a curse. My people would have been dead by the time your committees finished debating. We sent 17 pleas for help. 17. Not one species answered except humanity. The chamber fell silent. Several representatives studied their displays rather than meet her eyes. We followed every proper channel. Ramiz continued, her voice shaking with fury. We filed formal requests. We provided evidence of Krellian war crimes. We begged. And while we begged, humans acted. They risked their ships, their lives, their political standing in this council to save strangers they had no obligation to protect. Ambassador Howard pulled up holographic displays. This is the Krellian occupation of Teller 4, complete extermination of the native population. This is Krellian operations on Mervana, enslavement and systematic elimination of cultural identity. This is what you were asking us to wait for. This is what your proper channels allowed to happen. The evidence hung in the air like an accusation. The council had known. They had always known what the Krellians were capable of. They had simply chosen procedure over lives. Humanity violated galactic law. The Quilleran representative tried again, weaker this time. Then sanction us. Howard's voice cut through the chamber. Condemn us, isolate us, but know this. If civilians call for help and the galaxy turns away, humanity will answer. Every single time. We don't care about your laws if your laws allow genocide. The session ended in chaos. Some species demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. Others quietly sent diplomatic messages requesting defense treaties. The galaxy was learning that humans operated by different rules. On Nalari Prime, reconstruction continued. Human soldiers helped rebuild schools. Engineers restored hospitals. Ordinary crew members played with Nalari children who had forgotten how to smile. Admiral Wang received a final report on the pursuit forces. All 12 escaped Krellian vessels had been captured or destroyed. Not one had made it back to Krellian space with news of their defeat. She opened a channel to her fleet. Good work. All vessels are released to begin recovery operations. We're staying until every Nalari civilian has a safe home to return to. 6 months later, Ambassador Howard stood in the rebuilt Nalari council chambers and barely recognized the planet he had fought to save. The scars remained, certainly. Burned buildings still showed blast marks. Memorial gardens honored those who died. But life had returned. Schools reopened. Markets bustled. Children played in streets that had run with blood. Council leader Ramiz approached him with a Nalari diplomat he didn't recognize. Ambassador, this is Representative Tholes from the Bendari Confederacy. His people would like to discuss a mutual defense arrangement with humanity. Howard shook the offered appendage. The Bendari, your 18 systems from Earth space. Yes, Tholes shifted nervously. We border Krellian territory. After what happened here, we believe it would be prudent to establish formal ties with species who actually respond to threats rather than debate them. Howard smiled. I'll forward your request to Earth Command. Tholes wasn't the first. In 6 months, 12 species had requested human protection treaties, not trade agreements, not cultural exchanges, protection. They wanted to know that if the worst happened, humanity would answer their call. The Galactic Council had eventually voted to sanction humanity for excessive military force and violation of proper intervention protocols. The vote was closer than expected. 7 species abstained. 3 voted against sanctions entirely. The penalties were mild, barely more than symbolic censure. Nobody wanted to anger the species that had casually dismantled the Krellian fleet in under 30 minutes. Admiral Wang visited Nalari Prime for the formal dedication of a memorial to those lost in the invasion. Thousands of Nalari attended, alongside human soldiers who had fought to protect them. The memorial was simple but powerful, a wall of names, too many names. A young Nalari girl approached Wang during the ceremony. She held a picture she had drawn in careful detail. Human ships descending through fire and darkness, arriving exactly when hope seemed lost. This is for you. The girl pressed the picture into Wang's hands. My teacher says you saved us. I drew this so you would remember. Wang knelt to the child's level. What's your name? Lyra. Lyra, I want you to understand something important. Wang held the picture carefully. We didn't save you. Your people saved yourselves by refusing to give up. We just helped a little. You helped a lot. Lyra hugged her before running back to her family. Wang stood and found herself surrounded by Nalari civilians who simply wanted to thank the humans in person. No translators needed. Gratitude was a universal language. At Earth Command, General Akafor reviewed reports from intelligence services across the galaxy. The Krellians had gone quiet after their defeat. Their military was rebuilding, but they showed no signs of further expansion. Every species that bordered their territory noticed the change. Fear is a powerful deterrent, Akafor's aide observed. It's not fear of our weapons, Akafor corrected. It's fear of our commitment. They know now that humans don't calculate acceptable losses or strategic value. They know we'll come for anyone who targets civilians. That uncertainty is what stops them. Captain Rebecca Frost received a promotion in command of an entire battle group. Her first assignment was establishing a permanent human presence in the Nalari system, not as occupiers, as partners, as friends who happened to have a very capable military. Dr. Hassan decided to stay on Nalari Prime. She established a medical school where human and Nalari doctors could train together. The first class had 500 applicants for 50 spots. They were learning not just medicine, but the human concept that healing was a calling rather than just a profession. Sergeant Davis and his team became legends among Nalari civilians. The 6 soldiers who had held off an army with improvised tactics and pure determination. Children played games pretending to be Davis's squad, defending imaginary cities from imaginary invaders. The Galactic Council held yet another session about the Nalari situation. This time the tone was different. A proposal was introduced to reform intervention protocols, making it easier to respond to civilian populations under attack. It was called the Nalari Resolution. The debate lasted 6 hours. In the end, it passed with majority support. Proper channels would still exist, but no longer would they require months of committee meetings while people died. The galaxy was learning, slowly, that civilization meant protecting the weak rather than just administering the strong. Ambassador Howard stood before the council during the vote and said nothing. His presence alone was enough. Every representative knew that if their reform failed, if the galaxy returned to its old ways of endless debate while civilians suffered, humanity would simply ignore them and do what needed doing. The reform passed. On Nalari Prime, life continued its slow return to normal. Artists created new works inspired by survival and hope. Musicians composed pieces that captured both the darkness of the invasion and the light of salvation. Teachers told children about the day help arrived from the stars. Council leader Ramiz invited Ambassador Howard to a ceremony honoring those who defended Nalari Prime. Human soldiers stood beside Nalari volunteers, combat veterans alongside civilian heroes. The distinction didn't matter. They had all fought to protect something precious. "We will never forget what humanity did for us," Ramiz spoke to the assembled crowd. "When we called for help, the galaxy turned away, but humans came. They came not for profit or strategic gain. They came because we needed them. That is the difference between civilization and mere political organization." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the fallen, both Nalari and human. In the quiet, children played in the background. Markets hummed with activity. Life persisted. Ambassador Howard looked up at the sky where human ships maintained their protective orbit. More species were asking for similar arrangements. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had shown them that responding to evil with immediate action wasn't barbaric. It was civilized in the truest sense. Sometimes the only moral choice was to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Humanity understood that truth in their bones. The galaxy was finally learning.